Awesome. Kate Hemat-Siraky, welcome to the PAX Hospitality Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. I got your surname correct then, pronunciation-wise, right?
Very
yeah,
good.
I feel like I nailed that.
Everyone asks.
I worked
always.
on it. Yeah. Mate, it's so awesome to have you here. Like, I feel like, we've gotten to know each other really well over the last probably 3 and a bit years, something like that.
Yeah, maybe 4.
Maybe 4,
Yeah,
something in that
It's a
realm.
while.
It's a while. And it's been like, man, you were like one of the first people on the list when it was like, okay, we got to do, we got to make a hit list for the PAX podcast, like who are we getting? And it was like, okay, if we're going to talk about HR, if we're going to talk about people and culture, you're the person. And I feel like your name, I mean this in the best possible way, but I feel like your name in our industry is a bit like a if you know type thing. Like, how have you done such a good job of staying out of the spotlight this far?
Oh, I don't know if I have stayed out of the spotlight. I'm glad to be on your hit list.
Yeah.
That's a good hit list for me to be on. I think I am very passionate about what I do, and I'm very passionate about hospitality, food and beverage. Mm-hmm. I know the places that I play really well, and it's definitely this space. And a little bit adjacent, like our friends of hospitality, food and beverage, so that retail, sometimes food or bev manufacturing.
Sure.
And I think when you're really passionate about what you do, it's authentic, and people gravitate to you. So
for sure.
I don't know if you know. I'll have to look into that a bit further.
Well, it's just
maybe it's a good thing.
I think it is. I think it's a good thing. I mean, I just think I think you could easily be one of those people on Instagram with 80,000 followers and doing the daily
my gosh.
Monday motivation.
Ain't nobody got time for that. I could never.
But that's the thing, you don't need to, right? Because you're so sought after. And it's like, I just think you're that person in the industry when it's like, okay, I need to know something about this topic. You're my first call. And I think there's a bunch of people that have your name in their phone that are the exact same.
Well, that is definitely how I operate. I'm like, please text me and ask the question before you do the wrong thing. And then, because then the work we're going to have to do to fix it or clean it up is going to be a lot more. Yeah. So please text me, call me, definitely. And glad that maybe now we can more broadly share some of those little nuggets of wisdom.
100%. And that's what this whole thing's about, right? So when we started this podcast, it was for that exact reason. It was like when we got all these amazing people in our network, we're talking about such potent, relevant, important, sometimes even critical information that applies to all business owners. Like you said, a little bit even adjacent to hospitality, definitely anyone in the service industry. And, there's just not really a reliable database of information out there. There's a kind of inner sanctum of people in the industry that are doing the great things, that are doing it and talking about it and whatnot. But we wanted to sort of put it in one place. So before we jump into this episode, I just need to kind of place it in the journey. So I'm just going to speak about it for a second. So basically what season 1 is all about for us is using the model that we use at PAX. So we've got this diagnostic. We basically use it when we do all of our audits and when we're working with all of our clients. And this season was about doing an overview of that model, all right? It's like shaped like a pyramid. And then it was like, great, then we're going to do individual episodes on each of those areas because each of the areas of the pyramid has a certain toolkit that helps you get to the next area, right? And as I'm saying all this out loud, I'm just hearing how like businessy and like lame this is sounding. So,
Not at all. I'm a fan.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Fan for a model.
So cool. I'm glad. So basically this episode, so to just run through the model real quick, right? It's identity, product, consistency, promo. Okay. And it has to be dealt with in that order. All right. And the easiest explanation I have for that is that you think about the amount of people that you would deal with on an almost daily basis-ish that spend a fair bit of money on marketing when they haven't really nailed their identity, right? And what happens, right? So if your identity statement isn't clear, it's very, very hard to understand what product I should be executing on. It's very hard to know whether I'm consistently performing in that ballpark. And then I just start marketing what I'm doing thinking, oh, man, what we're doing is great. We just need more people to know about it. And then what happens, right? Like you're marketing this either inconsistent or confusing or both experience, and that does not help when it comes to building repeat trade. So for us, it's like, okay, you got to deal with those things in that order. We've done a really cool episode on identity and how you can determine that. We've done a really cool episode on product, right, which is all about, product management, product execution. And where we're at now is consistency, right? So in the consistency part, if I'm speaking to a founder or, an executive team or whatever, and we're talking about, okay, we're working our way through this model and identity is amazing. It's really clear. It's really compelling. Product strategy is really good. The execution is really great. Let's just go to the consistency bit. The toolkit in there is basically finance, and then it's HR, people, culture. Okay, and there's also a third section to it, which we don't talk about a lot, but it's governance, right? And it usually only applies to like bigger organizations. But I would even say, even for founders, it's good to have, a governance layer in what you do, even if it's just people that you speak to about how to run the business. So we're obviously in the people and culture HR bit. And when people think about consistency in a business, they don't often just go to financial and HR architecture. Right, but the truth of it is that's what that stuff is designed to do, right? It's designed to give you predictability, understanding, clarity, and therefore consistency in how you operate. And then obviously once you've got all those things right, you can smash out promo, and every dollar you spend on it's going to turn into $1.20 plus. So we're in consistency, and within consistency we're in people and culture, obviously, and HR. We just did an episode with Kate Bradford about finance. That was great. I loved it, although I think a lot of people were probably listening to it with, eyes glazing over. And I don't think that's going to happen today, though, because even though when it comes to HR, there is an aspect of it that's super dry, it's such a live problem that really, really bites when you don't get it right. And so I think when we start talking about this stuff, people are going to be pretty locked in. But anyway, that's where we're at today. How's all that sound?
Sounds good. And I do think it's interesting. When I very first started my business, I thought that I was going to play in the people experience space, all of the talent, training, all of that exciting stuff. And as I started working with businesses, I realized very quickly they would actually ask for that stuff. But if we can't get the house in order first,
right,
if we can't get, the boring side of the people, so the really good contract templates, the suite of guidelines, increasingly in this space, and definitely now kind of, nearly 7 years on from starting my business, I guess I'm not a startup anymore. Award compliance, roll and rate tables, all of your rules in your system. Like if you don't have that stuff right, first of all, you're at risk. Second of all, there's really no point doing all of the fun, exciting, jazz hands sort of stuff. So it does feel a little bit like going back to basics, and kind of similar to the Kate finance episode. Gosh, you love a Kate, don't you? Maybe it can be a bit boring, but it really is fundamental and kind of foundational to get that right before you build on that.
Yeah. And I mean, once you see it in action and you feel it, you can't unsee it, right? Like I remember working with someone who sort of, came into the organisation that I was at, and it was really interesting because we'd had a bit of a nightmare trying to find someone who could come in and work in this area. And this is going to be a good segue into a question I want to ask you. But what the point is I'm trying to make is that this person came in, and previous to them, I hadn't really found someone who could come in with the right level of experience to really add value. And then I found this unicorn, right? So they come in and they just like one of the first things they did, right? I'm thinking, okay, we're going to go deep into like strategy.
Engagement.
Like how are we measuring this and how are we keeping people in the loop? And the first thing that this person did was just audited our awards, right? And just looked at everyone's pay rates and just went, okay. And was like, okay, look, it's not too bad. Like, no one's really being underpaid at all, but there are definitely a lot of people being overpaid. And, that's not, like, that's fine. We're not going to like do anything where we take money away from anyone, but it's really, really clear that this is a symptom of the fact that the managers in this business that are doing the recruitment don't understand the award. And so what they did was they just created this like award cheat sheet and gave it to all the managers. And what I noticed from that was that the impact that it actually had on culture was that you just suddenly had, a group of managers that were leaning into recruitment more now, which means they were doing it more meaningfully, which means, that we were not just attracting the right people, but getting and converting the right people. And you just think like one little thing, like, auditing the awards and the pay scales and whatnot is going to produce such a great impact. Like once you've seen that, you're more than happy to invest in it. Yeah, I don't know. What have you seen stuff like that in the wild?
Oh gosh, so much.
Like every day.
The stories I could tell.
Yeah.
I think the really important thing to think about is that actually these days employees, staff members are more educated than ever.
Sure.
So if you don't know,
right.
they know.
Right.
And frankly, that's embarrassing if they're saying to you, hey, I'm not a level 3, I'm a level 5. And you're not on top of that. Yeah. Like this is easy stuff to be on top of in terms of just the basics. I do understand the awards are really, really, really complex. And we'll get to tech, I'm sure, but there is a way that you can support yourself. But I do think, one of the first things I did, I led a really big people experience team of like 23 people at one stage. Oh, yeah. And the very first thing I would do when employing someone who is, HR experienced but not industry experienced, before they even start in my team, you need to go and read the award. Right. Now, at that time, the organisation I work for didn't actually use the award, but it's this fundamental understanding of the industry in there in terms of, okay, they've got tools. What tools? Knives for chefs. They've got, they work in the early mornings, they work in the late evenings, like understanding all of those bits of how the industry works, how does it think about Saturdays and Sundays and public holidays. And, again, we can go deep down this rabbit hole, but if you have never, as a owner, founder, GM, got your award out and read it, like that's the place to start. Totally. And I think there's a part to go back there and say, increasingly what I find when I'm starting to work with a new business is they may think that they have the right award, but they actually may not.
Yeah, right.
And that is the kind of, yes, our system is very complex, but you do not assume. Do not do that thing where you go, well, we're in hospitality, I'm in hospitality, must be the Hospitality Industry General Award. Like, nope. Might be the Restaurant Industry Award. I had a really complex example that I worked through with a client not that long ago where they do some manufacturing and some retail. They were like, we're in the hospitality industry. Turns out actually they're food, beverage, tobacco manufacturing for one part. Okay. And retail for the other part, because in the retail part, there's no food being made there, just sold. Yep. And like that was a very complex one to work through. We had to check it with the Fair Work Ombudsman and get a little, yes, we've asked that question there. We actually went so far as to getting some legal advice as well so that we can really rely on that foundation. And then that drives into all of their contracts, their documents, their recruitment, exactly. How do we, get through the process of knowing how to pay people? Yep. If we've got the wrong award, we're making the wrong decisions. Like we don't know. So don't assume, do check. I often actually say to people, even if you've been doing something for a long time, it doesn't actually hurt to, go through that lens of, I wonder if I came in here completely fresh with fresh eyes, what would I make the same decisions? It's a great thing to do, which is what an audit is as well. Yeah,
absolutely. So I'd love to ask you about resourcing, right? Because for me, across, my whole career and now having done a bunch of audits for organisations, it's wild to me. This is just pretty anecdotal, but it's wild to me how under-resourced I think HR, people culture departments are, generally speaking. Like it's rare that I ever come into a company and go, oh, wow, you're totally hitting the quota of like, 1 to every 80 people or whatever it is, right? And it's just, and in some cases it's like drastically, almost like it's borderline risky at this point how under-resourced they are. And it's fine if it's like, hey, I don't really have anyone in my organisation that does this, but I've got Kate's number on tap and we, got them on a retainer and we catch up every whatever. Like, okay, that's cool, but I wouldn't call that under-resourced, right? They're spending the money. So, but generally speaking, it's not there. Do you see the same thing?
It's I reckon there's a bunch of people in their cars right now being like, hallelujah. Like, yes, we are the most under-resourced team. And I think like sometimes we've worn that as a bit of a badge of honor.
Right.
But it's not.
No.
And I think post-COVID, it's so cringy to say that, but the people experience teams had such a pivotal role in managing, where people were they safe, how did they work? It did help our function to kind of come to the fore a little bit in terms of showing, look, we're strategic. Like you actually need to rely on us to run the business, which, I've been in this space for my whole career, 20 plus-ish years. I think we've always known that, but I think it's taken businesses a while to catch up to that. I think that what's interesting about the people space in hospitality organisations and why we'll see a finance person, a marketing person before we'll see a people person is because, exactly what we're talking about today, it's actually such a broad function. And so if you've only got room for one resource, who are you seeking? Are you seeking that, real compliance? I know the award. I can set up systems so people can comply. I can make sure that we do performance management really well, that we do terminations really well, because that's kind of generally one sort of people person. Or actually probably what I really want is the sexy stuff. I want someone who can run group interviews, who can engage with chefs and trial chefs and offer them and get them on board and then provide some training, but then what training? Because, they can do our induction and stuff like that. So suddenly we've already got two people. Right. We can't afford two people.
Right.
So we probably go with the talenty, training-y person. But then, as we said at the very start, if we don't have our house in order, that whether we're doing those jobs or that person's doing the job inside an organisation, they can't necessarily be effective. So I do think that's part of the push-pull of why we resist the people function as we get bigger in hospitality organisations. I also think, and this, by the way, I'm a big fan of, we do think managers should do it.
Sure.
So we think, well, why would we need a talent person? Managers can recruit.
Sure.
Why would we need a training person? Managers can train.
Do the training, yeah.
And I actually agree with that sentiment very heavily. But
to a point.
Yeah, they're going to need some help to make it consistent across the organisation. Otherwise, we've got this manager recruiting this way, this manager recruiting that way, and everyone thinks, I don't actually know what to get when I'm dealing with that organisation. Like, am I going to get a really detailed, very comprehensive interview, or am I going to get a quick chat and then a trial? So
and it's consistent and effective, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, how do you know that the managers that you have in your team are actually equipped to be able to deliver the training? And equipped not just in terms of like, are they time poor, but do they actually know how to coach?
Yeah. And do they like it? Do they want to do it?
Yeah.
Like all of us, we all have particular strengths and things that we are great at, things that we're not. I might be a manager who's great on the floor, engaging sort of one-to-one with guests and engaging one-to-one with my team members, but please don't make me stand out in front of a crowd of people and deliver a session, because that's not my skill at all. That's not my strength at all. So I think allowing team members to play to their strengths, it's sometimes a little unfair to say, oh, it's okay, managers can do everything without being set up, and I do think if you are at that point where you're thinking, do I need that people resource in my organisation, I'd encourage you to try and really get your house in order first, and then you can think about clearly, okay, what is the task that I want my managers or leaders to do that I can give them templates, tools, programs, so that they can do that really well, because that's probably the role you need.
So herein lies the problem in my mind, because like what I'm hearing in that, so coming back to that question, like why do so many founders or organisations under-resource this department and dysfunction in their business? And what I'm hearing in what you said is that there's a complexity issue, right? And there is like layers of complexity. and it's not solvable with just one person because it's so diverse, right? And so I guess in my mind, it's like how, you sort of said, okay, let's just like put a hypothetical out there. It's like, okay, great. I've started a business. I've kind of grown it. We're getting to the point where we're, at 10 mil, even let's just say 10 to 15 mil. Mm-hmm. So we're moving from bootstrap, just turn up every day and make good decisions to, okay, we need to be good strategic thinkers now. And I've taken the advice of my mate who works in HR and I'm going to find someone, right? I'm going to employ someone to come into the business. So where the pitfalls lie is that I'm trying to find one person who can do all this different work, which is kind of wild. I mean, there's got to be a good metaphor for this. What's another industry where you're not just going to have one person who just does everything? Could you say like police department? Could you say like...
Not really.
I mean, I just go to mechanics, but like everyone always shoots me down when I use those analogies.
Yeah, well, no, I'm probably not going to join you on the mechanic one, but surely even mechanics, I don't know mechanics very deeply, so please like let us know if I'm wrong here, but surely they even have a preference of like, if you've got an electric vehicle, you go to a particular mechanic versus...
No, go really specialised, right?
Yeah.
So, sorry, everyone, I'm using an analogy.
Okay, here it comes.
Yeah. If you look at like an F1 team, there's not just like one mechanic that does everything, right? You've got a suspension crew, you've got a tyre crew, you've got an engine crew, you've got an aero crew. Like it's so specialised, right? So if you just go, okay, I'm just going to get one person to work in HR, heavy quotes, like what are you actually setting them up to do, right? Because you said like if you don't have the house in order, they can't even start on the engagement stuff. And I think most people have this misconception, which is that, okay, when I hire a HR person, I'm hiring Ted Lasso and I'm going to have some Ted Lasso shit going on in my company. Great. Yeah. And it's a bit like when you don't have any of your financial architecture in place and you hire an accountant and now like, great, I can't wait to get my amazing dashboards each week where I can just like wake up at 5:15 in the morning, open an email and every insight about my business is there. And it's like, no, dude, like that person's going to need to spend 12 months cleaning up all your shit before you can even generate a report. It's like, it's the same thing in HR, right?
Exactly the same thing in HR. Imagine that person starts in your organization. They go, oh my gosh, okay, we're using the wrong award. Okay, we've got to get that right. Now that we've got the right award, we've actually got to go through everyone and understand operationally, what are these people doing? Mm-hmm. That's not a HR person's responsibility to understand. They're going to need to engage with managers to say to the head chef, so is that person doing any ordering? Mm-hmm. Is that person ever going to coach or train or supervise someone beneath them? Mm-hmm. Okay, if so, they're on this classification. If not, they're on this.
Yep.
So then we're going to need to go through the whole organisation and classify everyone. Or not.
Yeah.
There's a really interesting kind of emerging thing that's actually happening in this space, which we'll definitely talk about, the award-free versus unclassified thing. We'll come back to that.
Okay.
So they're going to do that. Then everyone's going to need a new contract. Mm-hmm. So that's a whole process. Like get your spreadsheet out and go through the process.
And that's assuming your existing contract is sufficient, right? Like some people might be using one that's not up to speed.
I mean, I would suggest that that's most people. If you haven't had your contracts reviewed in the last 12 months, I was going to go 18, but to be honest, it's such a moving space at the moment. You are likely going to be missing something in your contracts. Actually, an interesting one I heard the other day, this is not one of my clients, was a person who said to me, oh, well, I don't have a contract. And I said, why not? And they said, oh, my organisation said to me, it's fine because you're on the award, so you don't need a contract. And I immediately thought to myself, all of the clauses that are in a contract that my clients have or that any good employer should have that aren't covered in the award, things like intellectual property, things like confidentiality, things like how we will treat a dispute about something that is not in the award, so not employment conditions, behaviour. So here's lots of things that the award talks nothing about.
Yeah, totally.
And if you don't have that contracted in a contract, you haven't made an agreement with your team about any of these topics.
Oh, dude, it stresses me out. I mean, it's like...
Sorry.
No, it's just even just the thought of like not having all that shit in a contract. It means every time someone starts, they're going to have to ask you all of these questions around what's the leave policy? What about my laptop? Do I get a laptop? What about key? There's just so much policy stuff. I know, and policies should be a different document altogether and really well laid out, but you can't even write either of those two documents until you've kind of done that and had those discussions. And if you're just hiring people and answering those questions ad hoc, it's like, fucking hell, how much time are you just like throwing down the drain, right?
Yeah, you really are. I think that's the really big thing, is that it is a lot of time wasted. This stuff in particular needs to be systemized.
Yep.
It needs to have a process, and you need to keep checking in on that process.
Yeah. So, okay, what I love about the way we've kicked this off, and I should have been a bit more instructional about this at the start of the episode, but there is a bit of a concept for what we want to do here.
Yes.
And what we want to basically do is, I'd love for this episode, and we need to do two because there's just going to be so much to talk about, but I'd love these 2 episodes with you to be almost like a bit of a how-to, for a lot of the business owners that have never really thought about this. And what I think is so interesting about it is think about exactly what you described, right? About for most people when they're hiring these roles, they don't actually understand that, you approach it just going, great, I want all the cool engagement shit, but okay, first you've got to go through all the levels of crap and compliance before you can get to that point. I actually think a lot of people that are tuning into this podcast are probably approaching it similarly, where they're going, great, a podcast on culture, awesome, tell me all the cool team building things I need to do. But it's like, no, anyone who's listening for that, you got to wait until the next episode, because everything we're talking about today is going to be the compliance stuff, right?
Yep.
It's about, this is how you go through, get your house in order, as you put it, so that when you do put someone in place, you can actually get to that point of the, engagement, cool shit, like faster. And also that you're just actually setting them up for success, not to just drown for 6 months and then quit.
I also think there may be a world, depending on the size of your business, where you get your house in order, you get all this stuff systemized, and then you can take a breather and go, actually, we are pretty good for our managers to run this process. We've got the right leaders in place, we've got the right systems in place, we've got the right people that actually want to do this stuff and understand. So we can sort of save our money on the people space and invest it in our leaders doing more of that. And I mean, maybe I'm lucky in the people that I get to work with, but I see that, head chefs, venue managers, assistant venue managers, they really do want to do that stuff. They
totally,
like, of all of their job, the leadership, the management of people, the sort of, pulling together of teams is one of most people's favorite parts.
Yeah. Well,
it's why they get into hospitality.
Totally.
So I always want to feed that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, for most humans, right, there's always going to be an innate desire to impart knowledge, right? Like if you're passionate enough to learn something, you want to share it.
Yeah.
And it's just giving people the resourcing and the support to be able to do that more meaningfully. It's only going to be an incredibly net positive outcome for your business. Okay, let's talk about compliance.
Yes.
Okay, so
let's go down the rabbit hole.
There's a lot to go through here. I guess, can I maybe give you the way I think about it?
Sure.
And then you can just poke all the holes in it
Yeah.
and tell me where I'm wrong. So when I think about compliance, right, I just think, in a nutshell, this is purely on the entrepreneurial, operator side of things. I just think I need to make sure that in my business there's a way where compliance is being managed and it's not me doing it, right? Because I'm going to get it wrong, right? So I need to make sure that, compliance is being looked at, it's being managed, it's being accounted for. And how the hell do I do that? So what's your advice for someone who's never really thought about this before?
Like everything, there's the really easy way, the way that you should start. And probably, I know you tell a lot of stories about sometimes you just have to start, right? Like you have to get the spreadsheet out and you have to assume that you have no tech and you have to do it the old school manual way.
Yeah.
And to your point, that actually is a really teachable moment doing that.
Big time.
If you can very simply, make a list of all of your staff. Even if you I work with some businesses that only have 30 staff across 2 locations, say.
Right.
You still should be able to make a list and you've got all the key details of everyone and you're able to say what they do. Now, at the very least, you need to be able to put like 4 sort of dot points against people. What is the job? Now, ideally, we would take that to the best case and we would create a job profile or job description for each of these people. You know, the triangle for me of like, as we think about compliance, the triangle is the employment contract, the suite of guidelines or policies, and the job description or job profile.
Cool.
There's a lot more fun and exciting stuff. But from a purely compliance lens, if we've got those 3 things in the triangle, we're pretty well protected.
Okay.
We're pretty well covered because all of the information we need for the employment contract, we're going to be ticking off the requirements we've got from a compliance perspective. So we know the right award, we know the right classification, we've captured the person's start date, we've told them who they report to, we've told them the basic conditions of their employment beyond what is just necessarily legally obligated.
Sure.
So National Employment Standards, Fair Work Act, their award, if their award covered. Then we've got the guidelines, which is kind of like the way we do things around here, or the policy pack. You know, as you said before, things like leave, social media, respect and inclusion is a big one, even now as it comes to compliance. And then the job profile is that thing that says, well, at the time where we employed you or at the time that we varied you into this new role, this is what we told you our expectations were. This is what success looks like. This is how we told you to perform and behave. And then that's the kind of, if we've had to require ourselves to do those 3 things in the triangle, there's probably very few things, I'm racking my brain right now, that are missing from a purely compliance perspective.
In a busy service, seconds count. Square's point of sale is there to streamline your operations from order flowing from the front of house to the back of house to tableside payments with Square handheld. It's tech your staff will love to use and tech they won't need to fiddle with so they can focus on the best service. Head to squareup.com because service still matters.
I mean, so can I ask you, you mentioned, like, there's so much in that, right? And when I think about compliance, where my brain just naturally goes, I don't know whether this is a good thing or bad, and whether it's because I don't ever want to break the law and get sued, or, you know, there is a best practice motivation here too. But first place my mind goes is just award, right, and pay scales. And there's so much more beyond that, right? Like when you talked about before, like, you know, respect and inclusion, it's so interesting. Like I'm sort of going to sound like I'm just tooting my own horn here for a second, but like every time I've ever set up or run a business, that's just naturally how I will think about the world, right? Is that you need to respect people and all the rest of it. And only since having so much exposure to a bunch of very diverse businesses now that I'm realizing that's not necessarily the case for a lot of people, right? So when it comes to like respect and inclusion, how do I approach that from a compliance aspect?
It's really great you asked that question, because for the last 18 months, a lot of the work that I've done has been going around to boards of directors and providing briefings on respect and inclusion.
Wow.
And so if we come back to this like governance space in the compliance layer, like it does start there.
Totally.
So even if you're a founder and you don't have a board, you don't have people, as you say, that I go to for advice, that I have a coffee with, that I have a beer with, I'd be starting to think about, you know, there is this link to governance here where start to think about those people like that, or you. If you don't have those people, then it's you. It's all on you. So I've been going around to boards saying, hey, just be very mindful that the Respect at Work report was handed down. A lot of changes have resulted in our system in various different places from that work. And something that we hear increasingly these days, and again, I'll come back to the education of staff members, because if you don't know it, trust me, they know it, and they're going to be telling you, is that we hear this psychosocial safety thing. So I tend to link the respect and inclusion piece, all of the changes that came from the Respect at Work report and the ensuing legislation that has come from that and will still continue to come from that. There's a few outstanding pieces. And everything in that psychosocial space, which is more linked to state-based WHS legislation. But if we get those two things together and we understand, okay, we've got some legal obligations, we've got a positive duty now, all businesses, even small business under 15, we have a positive duty to make sure, so positive duty, what does that mean? We have to positively, proactively do something to prevent sexual harassment and sexual discrimination in our workplaces.
Yeah.
So
what's an example?
Well, the old days were, I'm sitting here in my role as the people person. Someone comes to me with a complaint, and I'm going to use that language very intentionally, a complaint that such and such has sexually harassed me at work. And I would look into that complaint. I would find out if I could find the answer to did it happen, didn't it happen.
Right.
I would go through the process, resolve it, and then we would move forward. So that was me in the old days. Yeah. Positive duty says I can't wait for the complaint to come to me.
Okay.
I must proactively take steps to ensure that complaint never happens. Now, by the way, we don't use the word complaint anymore because if I've been sexually harassed at work, it's not a complaint.
No, exactly.
I should be reporting that.
Exactly.
So there's like language matters so much when we change the language from, and particularly for women at work. And I think this is really important in the hospitality space to provide a safe place of work means that if something happens, and some things do happen, I'm not complaining. I don't have a grievance. I'm simply making a report. And I work for an employer that says, wow, we've been taking these steps so that proactively that didn't happen. This one's gone through to the keeper. Let's resolve it and make sure this doesn't happen again.
So that's a great way of thinking about it. It's like a preventative, measure.
Yep.
What are some things that I can, outside of workplace education?
Yep.
What are some of the things that you would do? Like, how would you advise a business to be accounting for that level of compliance?
So in these talks that I've been doing with these boards, I've been saying, first of all, the fact that this is on the agenda is a really good start, right? It means, we're thinking about it and we're talking about it. And actually it's really good. And I'm talking about the board example, but I think you can do this in your leadership teams. Your group of, depending on how many people there are, your most senior leaders in the business, to just put this on the agenda and to have the conversation about how do we feel about this positive duty?
Yeah.
Because what I see sometimes when I talk at the board level or the senior leadership level is that people say things like, everyone's so entitled these days. Like, back in my day, if this happened at work, you just didn't complain about it. You just got on with it.
If you cut your finger off, you just tape it up and keep working.
Tape it up, get a bandage on there and keep going. Or everyone's so soft these days. Yeah. Now, you can have that view. You can. Well, no, you can. I can't tell you what view to have.
Okay, sure.
But again, let's come back to the fact that employees are very, very educated these days and they will tell you that your view is wrong.
Yes.
And you can have the view that, back in my day, people worked 70 hours a week and they never complained about it. But that's just not the way of the world anymore. It's not safe. Yeah. It's not allowed in most cases, and it shouldn't happen. So if you want to be on the front foot, you can change. Yeah. You should change. But I think the conversation is the thing that allows people to see, you've got that view, you've got that view. I have a bit of a different view. Let's make sure we can align.
Yeah, totally.
And then there's some really simple things that you can do in this space. And if we just cast our mind to what do we do in the WHS space, what do we do when we're thinking about injuries or risks, the same thing applies to the psychosocial stuff. So, should we do a risk assessment?
Yeah.
Should we identify what the hazards might be? Maybe we're a business that opens up really early in the morning. Maybe, like a lot of my clients, our team live really far away from work, so they've got long commutes. So even the working hours they're working with us, they're actually working, they're out of their house and out of their activities for a lot of time.
Yeah.
Thinking about consultation, like that's a big one that my beautiful clients have been doing over the last sort of 2 years. Sending out surveys, they're usually anonymous, they're independent, they're run by us to say, tell us about your experience at work. Like you can do this so simply, but to gather some data and say, how's our team going on this front specifically? I'm not talking about engagement, I'm talking about just health and well-being.
Yeah.
Gather some data. And look, if you're not running respect and inclusion training, so what are the things under that umbrella? Bullying, harassment, sexual harassment, the new sex-based harassment, which came from the Respect at Work report, and discrimination and how to resolve it when this stuff happens, if you're not running that training, and I'm not talking about tick the box online training, because the Fair Work Commission's had a bit of an issue with, oh yeah, we sent the thing out, we told everyone, that's how we trained everyone. If you're not doing that, having those conversations in your workplace, doing the training,
the loop.
You're exposed. Like, that's the bare minimum.
So it's so cool that you say this, and it really frames it. And one of the things I heard in that I think is really, really important for people to take away is that talk about this in your management meeting.
Yes.
Right? And put it on the agenda. Like, how many times do you see a weekly management meeting template and the culture section only talks about engagement? And it's like, man, if you have these conversations in that forum, that those outcomes, even if they're not definitive, will be memorialized, right? It's like we've had
what
this
gets
discussion.
measured gets done.
Yeah. And I love that, like, for me personally, it's been awesome over the years to see how default thinking this is for some people. Definitely not me. It's never the first thing my mind goes to is like how, like, I'm pretty like comfortable with risk in most things, but like, so it's not like my mind goes instantly into that area, but I've worked with some people along the way where that's the first thing they think about, right? Like, I got a shout out to Ryan Bresler who introduced us. And I remember one of the first things he ever talked about just in one of our catch-ups was like, I'm actually really passionate about fire safety. And I was like, okay, never heard an ops person lead with that, but cool.
Yeah, okay. What a fire drill then.
And it was great. And the way that when we'd have weekly management meetings, when we would have like our quarterly strategy sessions, that I just knew that voice was always going to be there to raise these things. And therefore then we acted on it and it was awesome. Or in the organisational audit that I do, one of the survey questions that I ask is, have you ever felt unsafe in your time working here? And man, those responses are so meaningful because I'd say of all the questions in that survey, the most amount of blind spot stuff is in those responses for the people that I'm doing the report for. So it's crazy. So anyway, I just think like I love what you talk about there, which is like, hey, just it's not that hard. Go to your weekly management template and just add a section around compliance and more specifically like, workplace health and safety at the bare minimum, but then putting the respect inclusion stuff in there too. It might not need, 30-40% airtime in every meeting, but just having it there means that you're going to basically talk about it and then document it and there'll be some actions that come from it.
I agree.
Yeah, so good tip.
Great tip.
Okay, then another thing in my mind is when it comes to compliance, right, is, okay, so health and safety, respect, inclusion. What are some of the other ones? Like something that I hadn't really thought about until recently is like being really on the front foot with equality in pay.
Yes.
Like the gender pay gap and whatnot, right? Like it's legislated now, right? That you
is.
Yeah, so can you talk us through that?
Yeah, there's a really interesting case that actually came out of Melbourne and it came out of the hospitality space, although it wasn't effectively resolved because unfortunately the facts of the case were that the person who was a sous chef had actually resigned and left their employment before this equal pay case came out. But essentially it was two chefs, one male, one female, both with the job title of sous chef, paid different amounts. The guys paid more.
Right.
The employer put forward a case that says essentially the reason for the difference was about their difference in experience. And I think any of us who've employed people in hospitality know that any two chefs are the same, really, even with the same job title. They might be slightly doing different things or capable of a little bit more or just, to be honest, have a better attitude. And so they're more able to be deployed across kitchens. But unfortunately, this all became quite public and the Fair Work Commission said they couldn't resolve it because the female sous chef had exited her employment and equal pay requires people to remain employed to be resolved. Yeah. But they did comment that had she have remained employed, they would have handed down an equal pay order, which is you need to match his with hers, hers with his. And so I think one of the ways to resolve this really easily is when we're using the award and we're using correct classifications, and even if we're annualising, so we're adding on the 25% from the base to get the annualised salary, then we're probably going to have equality. It's not going to be a male-female thing. It's going to be everyone who does this job is on this level. But the second we're starting to set salaries, and those salaries are market salaries, so they're above award. And the reason the sous chef is interesting in this case is because sous chefs are award free. And I think market rate, I can't remember what it was in the case, but I think it was in the 80s, like early 80s.
Yeah.
80K, 81K, somewhere around there. That's where we should be really paying attention to, comes back to that spreadsheet, doesn't it?
Totally.
Who's in our workforce, and just making sure we've got that extra lens of, is it equal? Take the male-female thing out of it. Like, is it fair? I think if we go into any of those processes with, is this fair? Is this right? Then you're going to be able to defend whatever decision that you make.
So tell me if this is too deep a pull, but in my mind, when I try to break this down, and obviously we'll do that experientially, I'm kind of going, okay, well, if I've got my policy stuff, I've got my award stuff sorted, I'm not even thinking, I don't mean this in the wrong way, but I'm not even thinking about gender, because it doesn't matter what your gender is. Everyone's starting on that number.
Yeah.
Okay, but then obviously then there's creep after that, right? Where it's like, okay, but not everyone's going to be progressing in the same way. And then that person who just, had my back a bit more, and then it wasn't even a conversation like that. It was just that they were like, hey man, I got offered more money from this other person, so I matched it to keep him. But then that other person didn't have that chat, and this is getting really messy now, right? And in my mind, this is the deep pull bit. Like, I just think about when you get into your processes around learning and development, performance management, growth and development for your people, this should negate the need for this somewhat, right? Because you shouldn't have a situation where there's a bunch of people on the same award, but there's a lot of disparity in their capability. Like, that's kind of on you, right?
100%.
And to have that, I Ching type, each one teach one, have whatever ethos you want to work with. You need to ensure that it's there so that everyone's working together. Like, I recently started working with someone who said to me, they're a chef, and they were like, I don't have, roles in the kitchen. And instantly when you hear that stuff, you just go, oh God, like red flag. But he's nailing it, this dude. And it is like, it's not from the perspective of like, oh yeah, I just can't be fucked with job titles, or, I've got this idealistic utopian idea in my head that is never going to happen. It's actually legit. It's like, no, I want all my people to finish on time. I don't want them to do overtime, right? And that means that everyone needs to know how to do all the jobs. So if someone's really good at something that's kind of technical, we instantly like get everyone across this and train everyone so that there's this kind of, rising tide floats all boats type mentality. Is that I know that's probably not the go-to recommendation that you would have for someone.
This is where the rub, the tension between compliance and kind of culture, I guess, or experience really kicks in, because the people experience part of me loves to hear that story. I'm like, great. Like, imagine how engaged you'd feel if you worked in that kitchen. Imagine how developed you'd feel. Unfortunately, our friends at the Fair Work Ombudsman would say, okay, well, if that most junior person, the apprentice, is actually doing that most technical task because you train them to do it,
they got to be paid for it.
Then they got to be paid for it.
Yeah, which is what that person is doing.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, I just think the pitfall is be careful not to create that culture of,
I see.
oh, I'm going to up-train everyone. Everyone's going to do everything unless you're prepared to essentially pay everyone to do everything.
Yeah.
Industrially, that's how we look at it. We think, well, if you're doing X task, then you're X classified, which means you're X paid.
Yeah,
so if you're willing to do that, we're fine.
Yeah.
Like, this is like ticking so many boxes.
But you're right. But that person is an anomaly.
It's pretty
it's
rare.
It's a rare example, yeah. Like, most people are getting stuck in that murkiness of going, well, I'm going to invest, in heavy quotes, my time into you to train you, but until you're competent, I'm only going to pay you what the baseline is. And then it's like, okay, at what point did that person become competent, and did you adjust their pay at that exact moment? It's so grey, right?
And further, is it an inherent part of their job? So they've got a job, they don't inherently need to do that task, but because you're a great employer, you wanted them to upskill and learn, you taught them that task, and now they're doing that task. but they're not actually required to do it in their job, then you don't have to pay for it.
Sure.
It's only when you say, no, I'm going to put you on the line shucking oysters for 5 hours.
Yep.
Then suddenly we really do need to be paid for it.
So, okay, I got to ask you about tech. And
yes,
it's funny because, before the first time I ever worked with someone that was like, hey, I need a HRIS system, or I need a HRIS.
Yep.
I was just like, what the fuck is that? And then they explained it to me and showed me how much it cost. And I was like, nah, you don't need that. Just come on, mate. Just use a Trello board.
Yeah.
Can't you? You can just use a Trello board. And they were like, no. And they gave me this look that was basically like, I'll quit. I was like, hey, get it, go for it. Let's do this, right? And then we ended up getting Employment Hero.
Yes.
Which has its haters, but when I saw it, I was like, wow, okay. Now I get it. It's almost like saying to your front of house team, hey guys, we're going to do service today without a pause.
Yeah.
You'll be fine.
Yeah.
Just write it down.
Yeah. Just take cash. Ask people.
Yeah. So, how is it even possible to even do anywhere near what is required as an employer without a program like that these days?
Very, 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 very difficult.
Yeah.
I've got a few clients that don't have, a deputy attender.
Oh my God.
I know. It's, actually I had an interesting conversation with someone who's not a client, and he said, it's okay. I just take all the timesheets and I put them into this Excel, and then the Excel goes into zero. I said to him, how long does that take you? He was like, oh, I've got it down. I'm really good now. It's like 45 minutes a week. And if you're willing to spend 45 minutes a week, that's retail, and I think he has about 30 staff. If you're willing to spend that time, okay, cool. Not really cool.
But it's also more than 45, because then once payroll gets processed and then 3 people hit you up going, hey, I didn't get paid the right amount.
Look, the reason we started talking was because he's doing some interesting stuff on his breaks across his business. A deputy attender would sort that out for you.
Yeah.
I think what's really interesting when we talk about tech and we talk about compliance is that there is a difference between a time and attendance system and a HRIS. So as I see it across the industry, it's very rare outside of, big, I've implemented big tech too, Kronos, which is now UKG. It's very rare that, I love Employment Hero. There's kind of a new player coming up, Rippling as well. But on a time and attendance system, they're not. They self say, we're not built for that multi-venue or people, jumping between roles.
Sure.
Then you get to a really difficult spot where you might need 2 things, and you're probably not going to be able to afford 2 things.
Right. Yeah.
So if you can't afford 2 things, you're definitely going to need, at the very least, the time and attendance system.
Yep.
If you build it properly and configure it properly, you can at least use that for that whole role and rate table. So you can get your award compliance, your leave transaction compliance, all of that very well done in a deputy or a tender or big as well if you've got a really big system like a Kronos.
Yeah.
And then if you want all the other bells and whistles, the recruitment, ATS, applicant tracking system, the monthly happiness surveys, the PDR, all of that sort of stuff, that's not going to come with your deputy attendant.
Right.
And so then you're going to need an Employment Hero, a Rippling, or something else, or a bunch of little tack-on systems that do this in different places. And if you're sending your people to all these different places, be prepared that they're probably not going to use them, or not all of them anyway.
Yeah, no one wants the 7 apps. But, I mean, it's also like they should, because it's kind of like, mate, we're living in an era where there's never going to be less apps. It's only going to be more, so just get used to it. But also it's like I don't think HR tech companies do themselves any favors, or they're not helping the cause when you see these guys that are like, we do everything. We're a one-stop solution. And it's kind of like, okay, you do that one thing that you founded the company on really well.
Yeah.
But those other 6 things that are really important, you kind of suck at those. They're really clunky.
Yeah. And so then people just don't use them.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So they pay for the system, but they don't use the functionality.
Yeah.
And then they say, oh, Employment Hero is really shit.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's actually not. It's just not built properly. I mean, I even hear that about deputy and tender. Oh, it's really shit. And then we'll get in and be like, okay, like, how come you haven't built this? How come you're not using your classifications? And people are like, Oh, I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah.
So, similar to what we were talking about earlier, go back, look at it with fresh eyes, assume you're brand new in the business. Is it set up right? Do you need some help to do that? Like maybe don't do that.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, so I think we should start wrapping up the compliance part, and because again, I know heaps of people that are tuning into this for the engagement stuff.
Yeah, they're tired.
They're just like, hurry the fuck up. But also, you're
going to have to keep waiting.
Yeah, there's only so far we can dangle that carrot. But it's also like, hey, until you've considered all this stuff, don't even think about that other stuff. Otherwise, you're just wasting your time and you're wasting everyone's time and money. But before we wrap up and go, to give the people what they want to hear, can we just do a quick, really practical, like, okay, I've never thought about this before.
Yep.
I've got 30 to 80 staff and I want to get this right. How do I get the compliance foundation in place before I go and hire someone to come in and build on it? Just give me the quick snapshot. Like what are the steps? What are you going to tell me to do?
Okay. Check your award. Make sure you've got the right award coverage or awards.
Awards, yep.
Be very careful that you might have some award-free people. That's great for you.
Yep.
Because award-free means $24.95 per hour currently until July.
Yep.
For all hours and no penalties and no a lot of things. So there's a little hot tip. If you take nothing out of this, find your award-free people.
Yeah.
Know they're award-free and give them an award-free contract.
Okay.
This is some of this emerging stuff that's just starting to come out.
Yeah.
Then once you got your award, give your award-free people an award-free contract. Get your classifications right for those that are award covered. Get this all put into an employment contract. Get that employment contract signed and put it on file.
Yep.
Get a suite of guidelines and policies so you're covering things like technology, social media, respect and inclusion, leave, how to manage money, even if that includes even using a POS system. That's still money.
Totally.
And then
IP.
document people's job profiles.
Yep.
Say this is what your jobs are that we require you to do. Ideally then get your deputy or your TANDA, whatever your system is, and make sure that those things that you've just done on the employment contract are also reflected into the tech and that it's properly configured.
Got it. So it needs to be housed there.
And then the final one that I'll throw in is like this is a bit of a bonus thing, but if who works for you in your organisation in the people space or who you work with in a consulting capacity, that could be employment lawyers as well, is not talking to you about the recent Fair Work Ombudsman v Coles and Woolies case and the implications for employment in your business, find someone to have that conversation with. Because the really big ones that I'm seeing across my clients are the learning that came out of that. And by the way, it'll probably be appealed to the High Court. I would love to get a crystal ball out and say, I reckon there'll be parts of that will be overturned at the High Court. Sure. We can revisit this in like a couple of years and see if I'm right.
Yeah.
But the big part that I think is relevant is the in the pay period bit. So the problem was, and we're often doing this in hospital, we're smoothing over the full 52 weeks. Yeah. And we're saying we have some really busy weeks and some really quiet weeks. The quiet weeks offset our really busy weeks. And in that Fair Work Ombudsman v Coles and Woolies case, they said, no, you're not allowed to do that.
Yeah, right.
Now, it wasn't even different award. They've got an enterprise agreement.
Right.
But the learning that comes out is you're not allowed to do that.
Yeah.
So in each pay period, and most hospitals weekly, the most I see is fortnightly. I rarely see monthly. So we've got 1 week to be better off overall than the award every week.
Yeah.
The implication is if you're doing something like time in lieu for overtime, I see a lot of my clients going, well, there goes those days. Because time in lieu, you might accrue it in the pay period, but you don't use it in the pay period.
So then you can't.
So thinking about moving to pay for overtime and for public holidays is a big way of in the pay period, making that right. Bonus points, a lot of my clients are reporting back and saying, well, we didn't really want to move away from time in lieu because time in lieu felt free. Yeah. It's not free, as we all know.
Yeah.
But when I look at my financials now, I see we had a really good week and we spent a lot of money on labour.
Right.
We had a really quiet week and we spent hopefully not so much money on labour.
Yeah.
But at least from a
spent.
financial perspective, when we're doing the in the pay period thing, which is the right thing for employment at the moment, based on the Fair Work Ombudsman case, we're also doing kind of the right thing by our finances, because we're not just accruing toil and in 4 weeks' time being like, wow, we had a quiet week and we spent the same money on wages because people were on toil.
What about then?
Win-win.
Can I throw something at you?
Yes.
Like in my mind, I've always never been a big fan of the payout toil in the same week. And I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
And I'd love to know where I'm wrong, right?
Yeah.
Is in my mind, it's like I'm creating this disincentive for my managers, because it's saying, hey, look, let me put it this way, right? Say we're working together and I'm like, hey, listen, I need you to stick around late tonight. Is that okay? Right? It means instead of doing your, let's just say I want you to do 42 hours every week. This week you're going to do 47. And at the end of the week, I pay you for that. So we're square.
Yep.
Okay. What I don't like about that is that now I'm creating a bit of a precedent to constantly go to that well and get you to do more than that 42 hours, even though you are being paid for it. As opposed to what I should be doing is going, hey, I'm going to get you to do those extra 5 hours, but next week I'll give you half a day off, or I'll give it back to you. Because what I liked about that as a policy is it's protecting the work-life balance, where it's like, hey, I don't want people to be doing more than 40. If I'm that busy where I need that to be, I should be hiring to fix that, right? And increasing, my resource base. And I also think there's a bit of a disincentive there for the employees to go, hey, I need a bit of extra. I've got to take my car in for a servicing. I need a few $100. I might just do some extra hours. And that's, from a work-life balance perspective, like that's the wrong way to approach it. So where am I flawed in my thinking there?
So the award allows you to do the time in lieu thing. So you're allowed to do it. The thinking that is concerning about the current precedent is, well, but that's not in the pay period. So it's almost like you need to make it right in the pay period and offset. Now, I would say just behaviourally, there's two areas of risk I see. One, that can you just make it up and I'll make it up? That relies on managers to be able to manage that.
Yeah.
So you need to be confident, if you're going to let people have that sort of flexibility, that it's consistent across your business and it's fair, because it may not be.
Can I tell you how I solve for that though?
Yeah.
In the weekly dashboard.
Yes.
Okay, so when we're looking at financials, there's a time in lieu section, and it'll show anyone who's accumulating, and what I would say is like an unhealthy amount of time in lieu, and then the requisite department head or manager is like, okay, I've got to give that back ASAP within the next 2 weeks. Yeah,
when you treat it like a liability, as you should, like annual leave, I'm happy about that. But I do see then that it becomes the opposite behaviour sometimes happens, that it becomes I'm not feeling that financially. My manager's not being like, why are these people working so many hours? Because we're paying them so much, because we're not seeing it. Even though we see it on the dashboard, we don't feel it.
Yeah.
I see the behaviour when we do start moving to pay versus time in lieu, managers start to get real sharp, because that hits the bottom line immediately. And so you will see the behaviour where they go, I'm not working that person a second over 38 hours, and I'm going to bring that casual in for those 5 hours.
Yep.
So, I think you've got to do what's right for your business.
Yeah, but no, I never thought about it from that perspective. It does definitely solve for that to a degree.
It suddenly becomes very pointy. Money talks.
Yeah, 100%, especially in this current climate. Okay, quick snapshot then, because we just went down a rabbit hole.
We're sorry. It was important. I think as we talk about the compliance stuff, that's the stuff that's really bubbling right now.
No, hey, don't apologise, dude. I'm all about tangents. But basically, quick snapshot for anyone listening that's like,
3-hour podcast.
Yeah. They're like, I want to get my head around this. What I heard in that snapshot that you gave us was that first, learn about your award, understand your award, figure out how to plug it in. So look at all your classifications, get your policies and contracts sorted, make sure they're dialed in and that they're databased somewhere.
Yep. Train on them.
And then
talk about them.
Yeah, and then it's all about effectively onboarding, like making sure that there's like an induction and orientation process for everyone in your team in those foundational areas.
Yep.
Is that about?
That sounds like if you're doing that, you're in a very good place to start to do the fun and exciting stuff.
Yeah. And I just think, though, for all the people that are driving along listening to that going, mate, I don't even have fucking time to, like, check my emails, let alone start that. It's like, okay, fair, but, like, you kind of don't have the luxury of not doing this stuff, right? If you're saying that you're time poor, this stuff's costing you time, right? This is creating 7 or 8 spot fires a week for you. So it's almost like sharpen the axe, dude, and get onto it. And if you're worried about, I don't know that I've got the intellectual capacity to get my head around this stuff, just call you.
Totally.
Like, ring Kate at Zest and you're fine.
Yeah, but I think be aware that employees are more educated than ever. There is a culture now where they won't hesitate to call the Fair Work Ombudsman. At least a couple of times a year, I speak to a Fair Work Ombudsman investigator on behalf of my clients. And touch wood, we're very lucky that we mostly avoid compliance notices by simply engaging with that person to say, hey, we've got roll and rate tables sorted. Here's how we treat training. It is paid. Here's how we manage breaks. I had one recently for a client where I had that engagement over multiple phone calls with a Fair Work Ombudsman investigator. They were at the point where they're about to serve a compliance notice for hundreds of people for a period of 18 months on intelligence that they'd received.
Okay.
I believe it was probably multiple, and I know who they are. But we managed for the Fair Work Ombudsman investigator to receive quite a bit of information from us about how the systems were set up, what we did. And they said, we're closing the file.
Wow.
So there's a best case scenario.
Yeah.
I know if you're sitting there thinking, oh, it's so much work, I don't have the bandwidth. Well, I tell you what, the Fair Work Ombudsman investigator will make you have the bandwidth. And that is not the time to realise that you don't have your house in order. Because being able to engage with them and say everything's sorted and they go, thanks so much. In fact, this Fair Work Ombudsman investigator said to me, keep doing what you're doing.
Great.
Keep doing the work you're doing. That's what you want to hear from them because then you're like, phew, now we can focus on the fun stuff.
I love that. So, yeah, if you're sitting there thinking you don't have time for this, like, wait till you see how much time you need for VCAT.
Exactly. It's exactly along those lines of like that will then force your hand and probably result in a penalty as well and maybe some bad publicity.
Yeah, wild. Okay. Hey, this has been hectic. I feel like, when
Need a breather?
Well, no, when I was messaging you about this, I was like, dude, we could do a whole series like
on people.
Just on this, right? And
it
would be amazing. So we're definitely going pretty high level and trying to put some gems in there. And I think you did an awesome job of that. But yeah, let's hit pause, take a break, and we'll come back with engagement in episode 2.
See you soon for the fun stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. Show notes, takeaways, and tools are available via our website, pax.melbourne. The PAX Hospitality Podcast is produced by PAX and Crate Creative. Support for this podcast comes from Square and Brunswick Design and Innovation. Our music is produced by Patricia Heath and Matthias Vestergren.